In today's segment, we'll be tackling the complex and quite frankly terrifying world of disinformation, try to share what we've learned. And I'm here on Voya Radio to help us all navigate the sea of disinformation surrounding Russia's genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Each week, we'll dissect the latest disinfo, uncover what truths we can, and arm you with some knowledge to help you stay informed. Let's cut through the noise and get to the signal. We'll be first going over today's disinformation drivel. We're going to take a quick snapshot of what's going on in the disinformation world. In this weekly segment, we'll highlight some of the most prominent and curious disinformation stories that have been making the rounds over the last few hours. Our aim is to illustrate key patterns and give you a glimpse into how misinformation is spreading. But remember, it's not an in-depth research dive. And before we start, we often get sidetracked during our discussions. Please keep any questions topical, brief, and focused. Try to keep it under a minute if you can. There's a relevant tangent to make a note of it, and we'll revisit it later in the conversation. We will be moderating carefully during this segment. And if you are not a recognized speaker, you might not be able to come up, depending. You can always drop a DM to us. So I'm going to start out. Aryeh, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay, Alex. Hope you're doing all right.
I'm doing pretty good, except for my Twitter account being locked for 9 days.
First world problems. First world problems.
Yeah, and this is something that's been mentioned repeatedly on the space. Even if you don't have them already, create some alts. Once they're created, you can just sit on them and do nothing. You'll see this account has almost no activity whatsoever, but it's here so that in case I get shut down on one of my other accounts, then bam, there you go. I've got something that's just ready to switch in and continue doing the work. It's always a good idea. I created a Yahoo email address and created a login and created a fellow with it, and that was easy enough. Now we've got an exciting show for us tonight. We're going to talk about some of the lies going on, and then we have Paige up as a guest tonight, and we're going to be talking all about her and her work in Ukraine. Hello, Paige. How are you? Paige.
Do you have her up as speaker?
She's up as a listener.
Paige is still up as a listener.
Yeah, let me. Here, look. I'm going to
I've
invite
invited her
Paige
up
to
as speaker.
speak. Yeah. There you go.
All right. So we will have Paige on talking all about herself tonight. It'll be exciting. Hi, Paige. Yes, I can.
So I have to, at least for a little bit longer, you may hear some light snoring in the background, and that is because I have a beautiful 5-month-old sleeping on my chest. I am helping some friends out who lost one of their babysitters. Not lost, but so I'm doing a little help, and so you can hear her snoring quietly in the background. I apologize.
That's adorable.
But she'll be up soon.
She can be one of our guests today too. That's perfect.
Yes. But I'm great. Thank you.
Good to hear. So I'm going to get us started with the disinfo drivel. Now, there's a number of various big disinformation things coming out of the Russian machine. They are mostly focused on American politics at the moment, although there's a fair bit focusing on the Canadian political landscape as well. Asha, relax. There's a dog growling at the other dogs because they dare come near. So the biggest ones we're seeing a hard push on the far right in Canada still, with more support for Pierre Poilievre and the accounts desperately trying to take down Mark Carney, who is the leading candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada. The Russian information machine certainly doesn't want Carney in charge. They did what they needed to help torpedo Justin Trudeau and have him resign, and his likely replacement is a disaster for them. So that machine is in overdrive. Also, the MAGA disinformation machine is in overdrive, trying to paint what's going on with the US government right now in the best light it possibly can, and it's not good things. So the biggest lie I'm going to tackle is what the Russians are focusing on completely right now. The lie being that cartels and fentanyl are the biggest threat to America. So Trump has announced that he is going to be shifting investigative priorities from Russian oligarchs to the South American cartels. And I do believe this is going to be a pretty disastrous move for a few reasons, especially given the current geopolitical and economic climate. Weakening pressure on Russian individuals is a bad thing. A lot of Russian oligarchs are deeply tied to Putin's regime. Pretty much all of them are, acting as a financial enabler of state-sponsored corruption, cyber warfare, and election interference. The U.S. and its allies view sanctions and financial investigations as key tools to disrupt Russia's economy and its ability to fund global destabilization efforts. Hey, stop fighting. Sorry, dogs. Where was I there? U.S. and its allies have been using sanctions and financial investigations as key tools to disrupt Russia's economy and limit its ability to fund global destabilization efforts. Reducing this scrutiny allows the oligarchs to continue laundering money through Western banks, enforcing Russia's power structure. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, full-scale invasion in 2022, sanctions and financial restrictions have been a crucial tool to pressure Moscow. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control and other agencies have aggressively pursued Russian assets, from frozen bank accounts to seized yachts. Deprioritizing these efforts could cause friction with U.S. allies, weakening the global coalition against Russian aggression. While South American cartels are certainly a problem, Russia has actively interfered in U.S. democracy, engaged in cyber attacks, weaponized energy supplies. The cartels mostly pose a criminal and law enforcement issue, whereas Russian oligarchs are part of the state-sponsored geopolitical strategy to undermine Western stability. Russian influence operations, including disinformation campaigns, political corruption, and economic manipulation, pose an existential threat to democratic institutions. Russian oligarchs use shell companies, offshore accounts, and real estate in the US and Europe to launder billions of dollars. This illicit finance fuels political bribery, media manipulation, and economic espionage in the West. By shifting focus away from these investigations, the U.S. is effectively allowing hostile actors to operate freely. Well, South American cartels are a real issue. They're not the primary geopolitical force in the region. China and Russia have been expanding their influence in Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba using economic deals and military cooperation. Reducing focus on Russian oligarchs could embolden Moscow's covert operations and alliances in Latin America, worsening security concerns. This move severely misaligns national security priorities by treating cartel crime as a greater threat than Russia's hybrid warfare. While cartels do cause harm, Russian oligarchs are enablers of a hostile, nuclear-armed regime that actively seeks to weaken the U.S. and its allies. Shifting focus away from them at a time of ongoing global tensions would be a strategic blunder with long-term consequences. This is also being used in tandem to further paint immigrants as dangerous criminals. So this disinformation is part of a broader pattern of fear-mongering and race-baiting tactics, often used to stoke tension and generate panic, especially in politically charged environments. The narrative plays into anti-immigrant sentiments and conspiracy theories, aiming to create a sense of imminent danger that aligns with far-right agendas. This kind of disinformation does tie back to the QAnon movement, and similar conspiracies exploit social fears to manipulate public opinion. For example, the people eating cats and dogs, and a claim that the Hell's Angels were going to go down there and stop it was creating a vigilante fantasy. It suggested that law enforcement is either incapable or unwilling to address these issues. It was inviting outsiders to take matters into their own hands. It was a narrative promoting extrajudicial violence, reminiscent of historical events like the actions of the Brown Shirts in Kristallnacht, where mobs took violent action under the guise of restoring order. Now, we didn't have large-scale violence, some small items back at that point, but it is an example of stochastic terrorism, which I want to get into just a little bit here. But first, I see Aryeh's got his hand up.
Yeah, just had a couple of quick thoughts to add in on that, Alex. Um, so it to me, and I agree with what you're saying. It absolutely blows my mind, right? Because I will be the first to say fentanyl is a major issue in the United States, as is cartels. But to say that any specific terrorist threat, right, or hostile act, foreign actors that are threatening our country is magically bigger than another one, right, is a huge mistake. And the prioritization, instead of prioritizing all actual venues that we are facing. Further, to say that it's the cartels over the Chinese who are supplying all of the precursor chemicals for the fentanyl, and without them, the cartels could not function. They could not make fentanyl. And if that this was actually the case, in my mind, you would be targeting and sanctioning Chinese pharmaceutical companies and the labs that are making these and selling them on the open internet to whoever they want outside of China, and allowed to do so by the CCP, assuming they do not sell directly within China. Right? We had an issue. It wasn't as bad with fentanyl years ago, and they or it might have been meth. I'm sorry, I don't want to misspeak. And it was all the North Koreans. They were making it up in North Korea and shipping it through China, and we pushed the Chinese government to stop them, and they stopped them. And there was like a 3-year period where there was almost none of it on the market, and then the Chinese companies started making it, and we turned a blind eye for years. So it's very frustrating to see this, right? Because then it also makes opposition for actually dealing with the cartels and actually dealing with the violence that we are facing. Back to you, Alex.
I can't disagree with you at all. The thing is with China, it's they don't seem to have any interest in stopping it. Just like the rampant corruption going on in China in all parts of the economy, everything from tofu drag construction to to gutter oil and adulterated foods that are treated with chemicals and dyes to artificially inflate their value. Baby formula tainted with melamine so that it tricks the tests into thinking that it's a higher protein content in the milk. There's a lot of very, very deep systemic problems in China. And I'd go so far as to say China is more or less unregulated. It's a wild west as long as you're paying off the right people. And that's a real problem because it strongly blurs the line between organized crime and the actual CCP, which at some point becomes indistinguishable. Is it a Chinese government action when this lab that is known about is shipping tons, literal tons of fentanyl out of it into the United States and bribing a CCP official to look the other way? It's that's the act of the government. That's not the act of an individual criminal. That's the government turning a blind eye. Please go ahead, Arya.
That what well said, Alex, and that's my understanding also was over the last decade and a half to 2 decades, the Chinese government has actively replaced the Chinese criminal element, right? There used to be triads or Tong or whatever you want to call them in China. They don't exist anymore. It's government officials. Those of them, they took government jobs and stepped in line, and they're the ones smuggling it out, right? I mean, I personally knew a guy who was executed years ago, um, along with his father, was roommates with one of my friends in college, and this guy was smuggling cars into the United States. On I didn't find out till years later on crates. But he was executed with his father, who was a transport minister, because of corruption. And you're right, it is the Wild West, unless you step out of line or the government decides to react to something, right? And then they go after people. So you will see purges, and they will tout how they're doing so well against corruption, but it's normally because they're trying to tell people you better listen to what we're saying, or it's a political opponent, or some other reason, not actually because they care at all about corruption. It's systemic. Back to you. Did I lose you, Alex? Can people hear
I'm
me?
sorry, I was talking.
No worries.
I just forgot to put my microphone on. So this goes back to this covers the basic disinformation narratives that are being spread out right at the moment. There are obviously a lot more, But the overwhelming majority of what I see in my mega super spreader list is these two things. And that sort of points down where the issue is and what Russia is really focusing on right now. A little later, we're going to get into the support of stochastic terrorism and how Trump is trying to foster violence within the country against immigrants, and how similar purges and how similar actions have gone in the past. However, before we get into the real dark stuff, I would like to bring our guest up. Hello, Paige. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Sorry. She my our extra special guest, for those of you who didn't catch it at the beginning, I am helping some friends out watching their 5-month-old baby girl, and she was just napping on my chest, which if you guys haven't had a baby nap on your chest, it's just the best. It's the best thing in the world. So she woke up just in time because she knows I'm loud. So
Awesome.
I think I was worried I was going to startle her awake, but we're good. We're safe.
I wouldn't say so loud. It's just a gigantic personality. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Paige, and what you do?
Yes. So, well, that's the elevator pitch, I
I
guess,
can get you
is
started if you like. Folks, Paige is one of the
no, it's
most
okay.
dedicated volunteers in Ukraine that anyone on earth could ever hope to ask for. She is just endless in her efforts and her genuine love of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, and she does so much that I jumped at the chance to have her come on the show and talk about what she's doing and how we can help. Does that give you a good start, Paige?
It does. Thank you. So, and for those who don't know, which I know I've talked about this in some spaces or you've seen posts about it, but I am not Ukrainian at all. My connection to Ukraine is having served in the Peace Corps after college. So I lived there for almost 2.5 years and I taught English as a foreign language in a village school and became really close with some people there. So just stayed in touch, went back to visit a few years ago. And then when the full scale started, I just started, I stay busy when bad things happen. So that's what I've been doing ever since. And so my first big like update that I wanted to share is I've been doing a lot of like getting caught up on bookkeeping stuff, over for 2024 and everything. And my overall total that I've raised since the full scale started is over $220,000 now, which is incredible. Just some soccer mom in Kansas, I'm not saying about me, but I'm just saying that like the ability for, having the internet and social media, and because that's primarily the only place I've really fundraised. So for the most part. So that's pretty awesome to be able to use technology for that. We're seeing a lot of the negative aspects of technology on the front lines and some cool ones, but the fact that we're able to help in this way, especially with the help of a lot of you in this room, is really, really awesome. So that's some pretty cool news that I wanted to share.
Awesome. That is an impressive number, and that's excellent work. You should be proud. Congratulations, and I know you're going to keep going. Let's talk about a little more about what one of your fundraisers looks like. So how do you go about deciding who you're going to work with and what you're going to do for them, and how do you go about bringing up money? How does it work?
Sorry, a little tiny hand has my finger, so it's hard for me to reach the microphone. So basically, the first about year and a half of the war, I just did civilian aid because I started by just helping people I knew. The village where I lived, and the village where I lived is right in the center of the country, and they had a ton of IDPs, internally displaced persons or Ukrainians that came there from everywhere, really, even from Kyiv. But so they were struggling to, give them any because they showed up with nothing except for the clothes on their back. So I helped a lot with that, and then kind of through other colleagues and connections I had previously established there, I started helping out in different areas. One of the teachers that I'm very close with, she's like my Ukrainian mom, has a very good friend who is a professor down, or her daughter is a professor down at, was a professor down at Keystone State University. So for some time, for a couple of months there, when they were occupied, when that area, when Kherson City was completely occupied, we were, I was raising money, and we were getting, basically had like a team of I want to be careful. There were people that were helping out to get food and supplies and stuff for the people that were stuck. Because I'm sure a lot of you recall, back at this point, very early on in the war, anyone who was even trying to leave those towns was just shot dead, entire families. And so they were stuck there, including like 150 university students and staff. So kind of just stuff like that. And then when I went to Ukraine in 2023 and went to the front line for the first time and saw, well, already the requests for civilian aid were not quite as intense or as frequent, because a lot of them had either returned home or had resettled. So, and having seen what was needed at the front, or rather what was lacking, I kind of shifted my focus, and I had started working more with this gal named Natasha, who, it's kind of a long story, but she's the co-founder of a small Ukrainian organization that helps. They did the same thing, like started with civilians and stuff, and then they kind of shifted to the front line, where a lot of their friends and family and stuff are. So because she had kind of already had been working on that, we kind of just used both of our networks together. So then over time, we have become very good friends, but have also kind of come up with a system where, she receives a request from the commanders and soldiers, and basically we shares them with me, and I raise money for them, and it takes a little bit of when we do fundraise, I'm kind of the one that tells her, like, hey, this money's raised for this thing and so on, which I think she likes, because it takes a little bit of she doesn't have to be the one making those choices, because sometimes it's people she knows in two different groups, for example. So yeah, and then and then there's other things that I work with. Ukraine Frontline is in the space right now. It's a nonprofit that's been really incredible in helping me with the bookkeeping, money side of all this, and as well as sourcing different stuff. They've done a lot, but like that's kind of, and there's a lot of different groups, like 3XR, Renegade Relief Runners has done the same, where we kind of work together. If I have some extra drones, then this or that, like we can kind of trade off, and that's really similar to how the Ukrainian volunteer groups work, in my experience in Ukraine as well. So everybody has to work together, or we won't, or there won't be anybody left to work, I guess. So
That's
so that's pretty much it.
that's a stark thing to hear, but it's true. There's we do need to be doing everything we can. And I'm gonna ask what you're working on currently. What fundraisers do you have going on at the moment?
Yeah. So so first, like, because I have people that set me that sometimes, and I might not have like an actual, sometimes I don't always have an actual one like posted or something, but we are always always. So and if there's ever something specific, sometimes I've had people reach out to me and they're like, I want to help kids, or I want to help women, females at the front, or something like that. If it's somebody that I can help facilitate that, or if I can get somebody in touch with somebody who can, I'm happy to do that. It doesn't have to all go through me by any means. But I've been fortunate to establish meet a lot of people that can help in those ways. So, however, I did just wrap up a day or two ago, a fundraiser for a 17-year-old. It almost sounds fake, because it's just such a tragic situation. But sorry, well, this little gal's a wiggle worm, so if I sound kind of funny, it's because she's just adorable and wiggling. So Alyona is 17 years old. She and her sister lost their parents, and she has a 3-month-old baby boy named Matthew. And unfortunately, her sister, well, not this part's unfortunate, but her sister and brother-in-law have a 4-year-old daughter. But the unfortunate part is that her brother-in-law was killed in battle, and then her sister is dying of cancer. And I mean, like, it's, I'm blanking out on the word. She is going to die, and probably sooner than later, unfortunately. So Iona, this 17-year-old, has taken on the responsibility, which, she couldn't, she was, so we're helping out. Natasha and some of her friends have been helping out as much as they could, but I posted this fundraiser, and that was another update I was going to share. We ended up raising just over $5,000, which was incredible. And so 400 of that was to help. Natasha's son actually had a surgery, and all of Natasha's money, Natasha being my partner, all of her extra money goes to the front. So I wanted to help cover that cost so she wouldn't have to, stress about that. And then the rest, we're getting Alyona and the kids, obviously everything. I mean, they requested everything from just basics like clothes, underwear, socks, stuff like that, to some dishes, to a stroller. They didn't have a stroller for the baby, so they didn't even really go on out on walks. So just a lot of that stuff, and trying to make sure that they're get everything they need up front, and then figure out a plan. Natasha and I are going to figure out a plan to help make sure that they're taken care of a little bit more long term too, as best as we can. And then we are using a little of the money to help out some extra kind of supplies for children of defenders, because a lot of the defenders, they are paying for a lot of their stuff out of pocket. And if you know anything about their salaries, it's not a lot. And the military related stuff is all pretty similar, if not more expensive in some cases than in the West. So, being able to provide diapers, wipes, medicines, and stuff for some of the defenders' children as well is also kind of, we're taking a little bit of that, putting a little bit of it toward that, since we had such a successful fundraiser. And then now where I'm just kind of back to our regular requests. I think I just posted, I meant to do it a little bit earlier, but I was enjoying the baby sleeping on me. Did I post it? Maybe I didn't post it yet. Just kidding. I think Twitter did this thing where if I post something and, it does the delay. Anyway,
Yeah, it doesn't always
I think I left
post.
the page before it was, yeah, it's annoying. But okay, so I'll get that back up in a minute. That's why I always write my posts in Google Keep, because stuff like that happens. So, but right now I have a truck for the 108th Brigade that I've been kind of making payments on for a few months now, and the balance is $1,850. I've got some hypothermia prevention and management kits that are 137, I believe. So I've got like $630 for 5 of those. Civilian and soldier medicine, which is an ongoing thing. Natasha and I have to buy about $1,500. It's at least $1,500 of medicine now per month, and so that's always ongoing. But and there's one other. Oh, and then I think I just put the line like $6,000 is like the total of all the other open requests we have right now, without listing them all out. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I will get that post up here in just a minute.
All right, sounds good. I'll take this moment just to mention our other fundraisers that we do have going on currently. You should be able to find them in the Nest. We are working with De facto and trying to raise 30,000 for 3 brigades. Working with Vanguard UK or UA, and their fundraiser is progressing along well as well. We also have Becca's fundraiser, and we have a fundraiser going for Alpha SBU as well. So we do have a number of fundraisers going right now. If you can afford to donate, please go and make a generous donation with any of our fundraisers. Aryeh.
Just important to clarify the use of language, Alex. They are not our fundraisers. They are fundraisers that we are supporting. We do not directly collect or involved in any way with the fundraisers past that we have. We believe them to be valid and good sources to give to. Some of them we've had previous experiences with various members and working with them, but we do not directly do any fundraising or touch any money or have actual fundraisers. It just needs to be clarified. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, we do not actually collect any money directly here at Volia Radio. We do support some fundraisers by platforming them. Prince?
What's today, Alex? Today is the day that Robin is careening down the wrong side of the hill, rapidly growing older and older and older and older. Today is Robin's 70th birthday. So as she is rolling down the wrong side of the hill at a rapid pace, she's requesting a $70 donation if you can afford that. That would be absolutely wonderful. Just, to a charity that we've just described here, you guys have just gone through. Specifically, she does the one with War Doggo. I don't even see those in the nest. Is the one that she has mentioned. I'll throw that one, the one I have of Robin's birthday tweet, up into the nest. So yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that Robin's old and make a donation today in remembrance of Robin's 70th birthday. I called her to wish her happy birthday, and she was out in Manhattan at a Starbucks. So she's living the good life today, and turning 70, and like I like to call it, rapidly going down the wrong side of the wrong side of the hill.
That's fair. That's certainly one way to put it. I would say, well, I don't know. I don't know how I'd go about it. But yes, no, it is Robin's birthday. Yes, please do be generous if you can afford to. Every $70 donation is an absolutely huge birthday gift for her. All right, so I'm going to hop back over to Paige here. So you said you started out in Ukraine with the Peace Corps, and so that was, you said it was back like 2012-ish.
Yes, sorry, we're getting a bottle. 2010 to 2012. And yeah, so I left about almost exactly a year before Maidan kind of started kicking off, just for history timeline wise.
That's fair. So you got to see pre-Maidan Ukraine first, and you got to see post-Maidan Ukraine. That's an interesting one to be able to speak to. Not a lot can. Can you tell me some impactful moments from your time? Something that really stuck with you?
Yes. Gosh, I have a lot of those moments, being in my early 20s and which, 2 years of your life is, especially at that age, a very, very long time. So I had some very great times, and I had some really hard, difficult times, especially I like to bring this up like a parent to their, or a grandparent to their grandchild. I lived there during the coldest recorded winter in 50 years, and the Black Sea froze over, and it actually, it was creepy. But the sound it made. But I would say just some of the times that I had with some of my friends, I ended up becoming really close with some people around my age, and just some of the things, I went down to the Black Sea near Kherson with a couple of them once, stayed for like a week, and just this tiny little, we're in this tiny little room with these little cots and stuff. So super, because as a volunteer, I didn't have, they were young, we were all young, we didn't have a lot of money, and so it was just really fun, that kind of stuff. Ukraine is just a really beautiful country. I didn't even get to travel too much while I was there, again, being a volunteer and not having the money, and also I had to work. But I also had some, I would say, of course I had a lot of really good times. Some things that were a little bit harder for me, where I did have a lot of had a lot of loss there. One of my close friends passed right after I left. And then I had a couple of students die and a coworker was murdered. So I learned a lot about Ukrainian funeral like traditions, I guess, which is interesting. But and you know, every day it felt like even after I'd been there for some time, there was always can you guys hear her grunting right now?
No, we can't.
Okay. She's going to town on this bottle. I just didn't know. But yeah, so you know, there were I would say one really meaningful moment to me was I only had like 6 months left, and I was on the bus in my village, and it honestly, for a long time, it felt like, really the whole time, it felt like I was living in a fishbowl. You know, it was a big village where I lived, but I was the only American that had ever lived there for sure. Most of them hadn't even met an American, like most of them hadn't met anyone outside of Europe, you know, or like from the US, I guess. So, it did feel like living in a fishbowl, and a lot of people were kind of nervous to, you know, because Ukrainians, and this has even changed since I lived there because it was kind of, I think, like a Soviet thing for a while, but not really, you know, keeping to themselves in public and stuff. So, and then a lot of them didn't realize how good my Ukrainian was getting as I lived there. So, you know, people weren't like running up to me and saying hi or speaking to me in public, especially in English. So I was on the bus again, like 6 months before I was getting ready to go, like before the end of my service. And this guy came up and came over to me, and I was standing on the bus, and he like reached over and tapped me, and he said, "Sit down, please." And it was only 3 words, but it was the first time that like in my, like, that person, and I don't know who he was, but he might have been a parent of a student or something, or just somebody who lived there. But he knew who I was, and he was confident enough to you know, get out of his comfort zone and speak English to me. And it just that just one thing, you know, I'm sure he has no idea how much of an impact that had on me, but I was like, wow, that just was a really cool moment for me. Because, you know, the whole time the thing with the Peace Corps is we're supposed to assimilate, you know, live like and live as much in the community as we can, which I did. And but it was cool to kind of have that happen the other way. You know, not that that was at all the goal, you know, to get them to well, it was to speak English because I was teaching English. But anyway, that was a really cool, meaningful moment for me.
That's a very cool story. Thank you for sharing that. I'd specifically like to ask you about so you've had this village that you've worked with, and you've known them for a long time, and I'm sure you've seen the children from there grow up, and you've seen them navigate, you know, the Maidan, and then the Crimean Donbass and invasion, and then the full-scale invasion. What have you noticed and seen, and how have people changed?
That's a good question. uh,
I didn't claim I was going to have
well,
easy ones. I'm going to have insightful ones.
yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say, well, some of them, like I'm very close with one of my former students now. I'm gonna try to put her in her little chair. So bear with me. There we go. There we go. All right, girlfriend's gonna dance at the club for a few minutes. So one of my former students is at the front, and I've been helping him, and through him other units and everything. If this was my child, I'd show you guys, but it's not, so I can't share it. But it's adorable. I just need you to know that. And so my former student and several of them that are fighting at the front, and or are volunteers helping kind of do similar stuff to what I'm doing, just there. The mentality really, I don't know. I'm thinking, because recently, to be honest with you, it has been a little bit more negative recently, but like, just because I think people are so exhausted and are, you know, a lot of Ukrainians are frustrated and giving up on all the promised help, not just from the US, but other countries everywhere. they just kind of feel abandoned, I think. But overall, they're still like, the morale at the front is still incredible. It's and a lot of that, I think, and not just at the front, but I think a lot of it comes from just the resilience and having gone through this so many times in Ukrainian history, that like that's just kind of I think that in the same situation, a lot of Americans would just completely break and crack and just couldn't handle it. Like not even in the front, like just in general. So I don't know. I know it's kind of all over the place and it's really distracting because they have this adorable baby dancing. And normally I'm like angry and sad on Spaces, so it's actually quite nice to be happy and laughing and smiling.
It's good to have. So you're seeing some more negativity. What do you hear from the Ukrainians about, what's going on in the United States right now?
They don't say, they don't even talk about it. They just kind of were like, well, the only thing I did get a couple messages on election day or the day morning after election day that were concerned. Like, we know what this means. And like one of them was like, like kind of a facetious congratulations on your new president. And we're waiting, basically, is I think what she said, but like anticipating what's to come. So there's that. But otherwise, they really don't talk too much about it. It's just kind of like, are you guys going to do what you said or not? And then they don't think that we are. So
Yep,
it's just kind of a
makes sense. And it makes sense that
overall thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense they wouldn't be the primary topic of conversation. They've got far more important things to deal with. One of the conversations I've been wanting to get you on to Signal and Noise for a very long time, like over a year. I wanted to bring you in and I wanted to talk to you about tactics for social media and how we can use social media more effectively. One, to fundraise, but two, to go ahead and counter disinformation and to effectively spread real information. What are some of the things you find that works well?
Well, fundraising wise, well, all of it, all social media, you have to post on a regular basis if you want to show up. If you want to be your stuff to be heard and seen, which you guys know that just from on here. I started out fundraising primarily on Instagram and Facebook, and then Meta ruined the algorithms. And so, sorry, is that really loud for jumping?
No, it's okay.
Okay, because she's having a blast right now. So, so on with Meta apps, and even sometimes on here, we see more like certain words can't, like, it used to be like if I just typed the word Ukraine, for example, if I had a post and it had the word Ukraine written in it, it just wouldn't show up in feeds. So I could, for some time, I would write the post in English, and then I would go back and replace certain letters with the Cyrillic letters, the Ukrainian alphabet. So like I would write the word Ukraine, and then I go back and replace the A and the I with the Cyrillic version, and it wouldn't recognize that because apparently the system was like reading the text. But then they figured something else out, and now it's like, even if it appears in if that word shows up, like if I have a video that says Russia is a terrorist state, or I write that even with the special characters, it still sees it. So I've kind of gone back to what I tried briefly before I figured that out, which is using like special characters like the O with the line through it and things, which is dumb and it confuses some people and it's hard. And like if people, use translators, they're not going to understand what I'm writing because it's not able to translate a fake word. But so that's definitely been a really tough, frustrating thing. I would say another hard thing is there's just visibility in general. Sometimes with like content creation and stuff, like I'll put a lot of time and energy into like making a video or like writing a really heartfelt post or something like that I'm like, this is gonna, hopefully this will motivate people or feel, I want to elicit emotion. That's the whole goal. and then it just completely flops. Like it doesn't, I included one word that's like a no word or something, and it's seen 109 times, and then it stops at that, like just visibility. So I would say um, being patient too with that kind of stuff, because even if you're talking about Russian propaganda or misinformation, and you want to write a really cool, informative post about it, the same thing might happen to you, or you put all this work into it, and then it's like, dang it, nobody's seen it. So depending on what it is, or like how, if I'm trying to raise money, I can't wait to repost it, for example. So I'll delete it and I'll try again like pretty quickly. But I don't know, I guess just experimenting, because it's constantly changing. And I know that sometimes people send me the thing and they're like, here's the current algorithm, but like, which is helpful sometimes, but to be honest, overall, I've just kind of figured it out as I go and tried it. And like sometimes those aren't always, I haven't found them to always be the most accurate. I get it that it's the code, I guess. But yeah, so I guess just being patient and being willing to spend the time to put the content together, and then if it doesn't quite get the visibility that you want because it's an important message or because you're trying to help somebody or something, try again. And then also reach out to people. I try not to. I'm not a big fan of tagging other people in posts, especially larger accounts. Personally, it's really difficult to. This girl's wild. It's really difficult to keep up with notifications as it is. So, I would personally, I would rather like DM someone or something to ask them to help share or to interact or something like that. But I also try not to overuse that too, because I don't want to annoy people, which I know, everybody's like, it's not annoying, but it's just me. So I don't, it was all kind of negative. Anyway, you guys get out there and do it. Obviously you can, it's possible. I mean, as much as like, that's why I'm saying, like, I have had amazing success being able to do this. It takes a lot of time to fundraise, to create the stuff, to, you want to, like I said, you want to elicit emotions. Well, I have to, I have a hard time sometimes when I get down or frustrated of like being super negative, and I'm like, I got to keep people motivated and believing and all that. So it's a balance.
No, and that's great advice too. And it's the same advice we hear from the media professionals who want to brand as well. Be consistent, post regularly, stay on message, and get out there and just make sure your presence out there in the world where people can see what's going on. And that is good. It's good to know it works, and it's good to know it's worked for you fairly well too. So I couple other questions here. So I know you've supplied a lot of different things for the defenders. You've done essentials like generators and helmets and medicines, but you also help people in physical ways with your efforts too. Can you elaborate a little on what that sort of entails and why it's important?
We're gonna have to narrow it down, because I can think of a couple of different things you might be talking about. Do you mean like local, like events, or like surgery type stuff?
All of it. We're here to hear who you
Oh,
are and
okay.
what you're all about. So please, it's the way to get everyone to get to know who you are.
Yeah. So I locally here in Kansas, in the Kansas City area, I started out volunteering with a nonprofit. Parties. Is the party over? So I started out volunteering. Come here, sweet thing. Volunteering with a local organization, and then they asked me to be on the board at the beginning of 2023, since I was already basically doing all the stuff with them, just not getting my voting, I guess, on things. So I am on the board of Stand With Ukraine KC, and we do fundraising. They have done quite a bit of fundraising for supplies and stuff in Ukraine, but a lot of what they've done, they have done are like local events for refugees and the existing, Ukrainian population or community over here and support. We did a tax event last year, to help to have Ukrainians doing their taxes in the U.S. for the first time. Like, we paid for it basically and had people to help with that, and everything from that to like holiday events, all that kind of stuff. So, and then some I've helped with. We have all helped with new refugees in the area who, come here and don't have much of anything at all. So getting them bedding and household supplies or whatever they might need. Unfortunately, not every refugee is treated equally here. So, and sometimes they need a little bit more support than their sponsors are giving them. So we've helped step in that case. And then, as far as the other kind of stuff, that was kind of like with fundraising. Not everything has been both on the civilian and the soldier side. We've helped pay for fundraising has helped pay for surgeries for like a newborn that had this defect, basically where he couldn't eat, essentially like the tube. His mouth didn't connect to his stomach, so and his parents. His parents had to flee. I don't know the whole. Anyway, I don't want to get into that because it was, but that, and then like we helped with rehab for a couple soldiers that have been severely injured. Making sure they have the supplies, helping their families, things like that as well. So, I guess that's primarily the details. We're having bottle time right now, so but yeah, so I think those are the main things, unless there's something that you're also thinking about that I'm forgetting.
Not something in specific, no. Now I would like to play a little game here if we can. This is going to take it back to disinformation. So I'm going to read you out a statement here, and I want your take based on the actual reality. I'm going to read you some major disinformation statements that have been used by Russia specifically to paint Ukraine. And feel free to be as explicit as you want. I don't mind. So the first one will be that Ukraine is a Nazi state and it is controlled by Nazis and requires denazification.
That's fucking dumb. I think that, first of all, are there alt-right people there? Sure, I'm sure there are. I don't know them, and I didn't see them living there. I had never heard of Stephen Bandura until Votnik started talking about him a lot on Twitter, to be honest. But there are also those people everywhere in the world, and so I certainly don't think it's a rampant problem there. And it's as with most Russian disinformation, if they're accusing someone else of doing something or being some way, it's because it's actually about them. So I think that's pretty telling right there.
It is, yeah. That's a good response. Aryeh, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to make a joke about there being a minor, so Paige not being able to completely curse, but that one's well past. As long as
she's very little. She's only 5 months. She doesn't know.
I understand, Paige. As I said, bad joke. Glad to see you on the space. Enjoying hearing the conversation, and just to speak right to the Banderas and similar people, in Ukrainian history. And this is something I think that's very important, right? Anti-Semitism has existed throughout the world. There are a handful of countries where there are almost no examples till to either modern times or that for 90% of the history it didn't exist, right? Ukraine has had periods where it's been very good, and there's been periods where it's been very bad. It's important to remember that ethnicity-wise, the people in the country were not all Ukrainians. Many of the atrocities were Russians, were Poles, Greeks, other people committed crimes. History is not great, right? The question is, how do you remember people? How do you deal with the violence and issues? And how do you move forward? Right. And in Ukraine, compared to every other country in Europe, with arguably maybe the exception of Germany, right, has done more to attempt to change the perception within the country about Jews, right? And every single poll shows this. Ukraine is one of the only countries in Europe that has actively put people in jail for engaging in anti-Semitic talk, right? And there are simultaneously other historical figures of similar or equal and greater importance to the ones the Russians bring up, right? Who did the complete opposite, who literally executed people for committing pogroms against Jews, who allowed Jews into their Cossack host, right? You can look to various points in Ukrainian history. Ukraine was the only place in Europe up until I think it was 1400s or 1500s, that the Jews owned cannons and had fortified towns. We had guns. We were able to defend ourselves. It changed under the Russians, and there were Ukrainians who did, bad things, right? You want to go through European history, almost every European country, if not every European country that has had a Jewish population, still venerates people who butchered Jews. This is not unique to Ukraine. You cannot hold Ukraine on a pedestal when you do not hold to a standard you do not hold the rest to, right? There were issues with Bandera, right? There are racists and bigots within Ukrainian society. They're within every country. The way the majority of the people understand it and it's talked about is not in that respect. In the same way, in Spain there are kings that are talked about, or in England, or in Germany or France, right? And it's important to remember the Ukrainians are very open about this. Ukrainian historians are happy to talk about the anti-Semitism in the history, whereas many other countries in Europe, they still deny it to a great extent. And it's a very insane statement to me. Further considering modern Ukrainian history, the revitalization of Jewish life over the last several decades that hasn't happened in any other European country. It's complete BS. And then to say it when Zelensky is Jewish, when the mayor of Kiev is Jewish, when most of the people in the political running, if the war ends and there are elections, are Jews, right? It's just absolutely insane. And it's even more insane when the Russians actively, openly target, right, Jewish centers of worship and schools in Ukraine. And then the Russians support Iran through a military alliance on attacking Jews around the world, and various terrorist groups, from Hezbollah to the Houthis, who do the same thing. So to me, I'm sorry for going off on a quick tangent there. I'll give it back to you guys, but it really upsets me hearing it, and sadly, people buy into it, and it's very easy to go to a couple of anecdotal examples and paint a very distorted picture if you haven't done the research. And it's just very sad that sadly there are media organizations and people within politics that are happy to run with that, right? When they have been presented the proof that is complete BS. Back to you guys.
The next question is really going to rile you up then, Aryeh, but I look forward to seeing what you have to say. Mary, I see you've got your hand up. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, in one of the congressional hearings, Timothy Snyder said that for the alt-right, it's less than 3% total that makes up for the population. So I just want to, I believe someone was asking that. So thanks.
Thank you for giving us that. Mary, is somebody knocking on your door with a sledgehammer?
No, that's actually my son. He's happy kicking.
Oh, okay.
As long as we don't need to call anybody and have police sent there to save you.
Sorry, my mic is sticking, so I'm just going to drop down the listener.
I love when we hear your son, Mary.
Yeah, thankfully that's happy kicking and not upset kicking.
All right. Thank you for coming up, Mary. So our second comment in the lightning round that I would like you to kind of take a look at with your experience is that Ukraine is a puppet of the West and Israel, whose only purpose is to destroy Russia.
Right, which is exactly why Russia or Ukraine invaded Russia and has been invading them and killing them for 3 years, right?
That's exactly it. Yes, the atrocities committed in Moscow under the SBU Alpha brigades is just absolutely horrifying. It is nonsense. And do you get any feeling whatsoever that the Ukrainians are in any way in this because the United States is pushing them towards it?
No, no. Do I think that there are people in the U.S. who can benefit from certain decisions being made or something? Of course, but as far as like an overall intentional type of, absolutely not.
Exactly.
Does it
It's an easy one.
help that it's weakening that that it's not weak, but that one of our biggest enemies is weaker because they're wasting all their stuff? Yeah, sure, but that wasn't like a planned thing. Like that's
No,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's just it's
I am
asinine.
trying to. I've taken the 8 stupidest narratives that the far right has been spreading, and we're going to have you speak to what you've seen to sort of knock it right out of the park. Aryeh, I see your hands up.
So, Paige, what you're telling me is this isn't a global Zionist conspiracy to destroy the Russian people and make all of Russia Jewish again.
No, I mean, why would you get Ukraine involved when you could just use the lasers that they say are being used to change weather or whatever?
See, that's the thing that really kills
Be much
me.
more efficient.
It kills me about all of these theories. Is it's like, we control X, Y, Z, D, E, F, G, but we're more ineffective than somebody after drinking a gallon of whiskey. Apparently, we can't. We've got space lasers. We can't use them. We control the world, but we can't even manage a country the size of New Jersey. It's absolutely hilarious. But
All the money
so
in the world, but a bunch of you still can't afford groceries. That's a big one.
yeah, that's one of the ones that have always really killed me. I mean, I remember when I was younger, people used to be like, well, in New York, a lot of Jews have money, and I'm like, most Jewish people in New York live below the poverty line, right? Like, I'm sorry, there's a segment that is very rich, but it's absolutely insane. And sorry, it's also even more frustrating for me considering the Russians themselves, right? If you watch Russian television, if you look at what Russian politicians have said, they're literally doing this type of stuff in reverse, right? They are saying Israel has no right to exist. They have said similar things, and it blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. Back to you guys.
Alrighty, the next one we're looking at is Ukraine. Ukraine is run by corrupt oligarchs, like the guys who run Burisma, who are actually Russian, by the way. Paige?
Yeah, that goes back to the what they say is actually about them. I think it's kind of that one's kind of funny to me because you never hear about all the houses and stuff that Putin has. It's like, first of all, a lot of people don't even realize. I think more now do, but especially in the beginning, a lot of people didn't even realize that Zelensky was famous and wealthy before he was in office. So there's that. But also, it's so when I lived there, Yanukovych was the president. Yanukovych was a Russian pawn. Um, he was corrupt as hell. I mean, so it's I've seen what that looks like, and both Yanukovych and the Putin and the oligarchs in Russia. So it's just I don't know. I guess I don't have like a lot of like, besides just that it's just silly and common sense that like, of course he's got some money and because he had movies and a popular TV show. When I lived there, I used to watch Zelensky as a host, comedian, and host on a variety show, like every evening when at my host family's house and stuff when the first couple months. But so, but the thing is, Aryeh had mentioned something about doing research, and I think the biggest thing with all of these types of claims is that the people that are saying any of this stuff, like none of them have actually done any legitimate real research. They're just regurgitating the same garbage over and over again, and that's why we keep hearing the same BS.
Right.
Thank you.
There's a surprising longevity to a lot of these claims. They've been put together in powerful memes that work fairly well at getting a simple, if completely false message across to people and having it stick amongst certain types. Aryeh, go ahead.
Paige, that was a very good point, and it's important for people to remember that most people don't do any research. They pick somebody they like, whether it's a news presenter, a politician, a family member, a friend, a coworker, or somebody, and they just regurgitate it. I don't remember very much from high school, but I do remember when I was taking the SATs for the second time, there was a one of the reading comprehension questions, which was from a Pew survey, which I then looked up after the fact, was talking about the average American voter, and the question was pertaining to being able to reason percentages or something. But in any case, the paragraph explained that 99.98% of Americans, and this is in the 90s, I imagine it's a little bit, higher now, or a little bit lower now because of the amount of access people do have to the news and media, uh, um, that they had no idea what any politician they had ever voted for had ever done before office, right? That 99.98% of people could not say one law, one bill, one thing before they voted for a president of the United States, right? That they had done as a politician beforehand. And that was at a point when all the presidents were formerly being, at that point, the presidential candidates were, had all previously been politicians. And, this is a major issue. And right, I forgot who said it. A lie travels halfway around the world before the response has time to even be written. And this is something I'm sure anybody who has engaged right in debunking lies, in text on Twitter, especially before Twitter changed, will be well aware of. Where somebody puts in a lie, it's one sentence. You need 3 paragraphs to respond to it. As soon as you do, they just go on to the next one. Back to you, Alex.
Alrighty, so the next one we were looking at is that Ukraine is losing the war repeatedly. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen? Maybe in the south, maybe in Kursk.
Yes. So, side kind of related note on that. I have 2 young sons, and they will occasionally check in, especially the older one, and say, Mom, who's winning the war right now? And I try to be, I don't talk to them very much about this kind of stuff, but I also, when I can, try to use it to teach lessons. But it's kind of funny because now when he asks, he goes, I know no one wins in war, but who's winning? Because I've told him that. So it's like, he's like, okay, Mom, I get it. But like, he's also young, and it's like, there's good guys and bad guys. Like, who's winning? It's like a video game in his mind. So I I have some buddies that are that have been in Kursk. Some of the imagery and stuff has been on social media, but there's been some pretty cool pretty cool butt kicking that they were doing up there, and they're safe. So that's obviously my main thing too. I'd rather them not kick butts and be alive and in one piece. But anyway, they did both. So Kursk for a while was kind of at a standstill, and then for a little bit it was like we would take an area, clear an area from Russians, and then we wouldn't like stay there to keep this, and then they would take it back pretty quick. Anyway, so it was kind of just not a total standstill, but it just wasn't, we weren't advancing either way. But I've heard, I know that my buddies are up there and had some success, and then the theories about why we were doing that in the first place are kind of all over. But anyway, so I'm just saying, like, I hadn't heard much of anything from there for a while, and now I've heard good stuff. So there's that, and then I have quite a few units that are in the Zaporizhia area, front line, in Donetsk, near that area. And where are you trying to use? She's flapping her arms like she's trying to fly away. So the winter, fortunately, which is not super surprising, but it's been relatively, I want to say relatively quiet, but I mean relatively quiet for war. The biggest thing is at least from what I have seen or been told, there hasn't been as much like man on man, storming trenches and areas and stuff. It's just a lot of drones because both sides have a ton of drones now. So most of I get a lot of requests for drone jammers now, for example, because a lot of our groups get hit every couple, 2 or 3 per hour, basically, FPVs incoming. So there's different types of anti-drone stuff. There's like more stationary type things, all the way down to these little like jamming guns. They kind of look like goofy video game guns that are much lighter, much less expensive, and so they can move those around, when they go out, if they're not necessarily on a mission, but out at the zero. So and that can help them a lot with movement, for example, when you have so many FPVs flying around all the time, and you got to get some of these, some guys out of an area to go home, to go, just moving people from A to B. Those can be helpful as well, because you obviously can't be lugging around this giant drone jamming system. And then obviously the ones on the cars. I know some of the cars in Kursk have like multiple different kinds, because there's so many different types of frequencies and everything. Have heard quite a bit about the tethered drones using the fiber optic cables, and some other technologies being used. I'm not going to because I don't know if they're online. So I have some people who, both through the internet and that I know in person, who have been involved who are knowledgeable in those types of things. And so they send me, tips or information sometimes to pass on to the guys, just ideas or things, because they have to come up with a lot of their own stuff. And it's not even always that they have to, but they do, because a lot of war is in the military is hurry up and wait. It's not always intense battles, so they are they have time to build their own jammer sometimes, or they have time to figure this kind of stuff out, especially when they do have access to the internet. So yeah, I have one group that I have a couple of. It's so much easier to talk about horrible war stuff when you're looking at it and holding an adorable baby. I gotta tell you that. This is great for my mental health, to be honest. So one of my groups that I have a couple of really close friends in has about a half dozen guys left. Unfortunately, we've lost a few of them, also including a buddy of mine. And you're right. And they've got a decent sized group of an enemy on the other across the field. So I'm tired of it, and I want to fix that. So I'll leave it at that. But it's again a lot of the drones and stuff like that, and it's just it kind of felt like similar last year maybe with larger equipment. They were just firing RPGs and stuff, and yeah, like heavy artillery and kind of stuff back and forth. And now it's just, and neither side was really pushing forward or whatever. Now I'm not talking about Pokrovsk. I know that Pokrovsk has pushed quite a bit, and unfortunately, a couple of the towns that I was in a little less than a year ago, last April, have been taken, which has been really hard to think about because there are a lot of civilians still there, and I guarantee that they weren't all gone by the time that this was happening. So that's just really horrible because they had already been attacked for a long time with large bombs and stuff like that, and now they're occupied. So I know that was kind of all over the place and touched on a lot of different things, but
that's
hope
good,
that
though.
helps.
It's really addressing where some of the lies come from and giving a little bit of personal perspective on it, which I think, especially in the podcasts that will download and follow this conversation, it's a way to illustrate that some of this is absolute nonsense from a person who's been there and who spent time there. The next one we're going to play in this little game, and I'm going to combine the last two because they're very closely related anyway. How do you what's the general feeling in Ukraine amongst the people you know that not only are Ukrainians and Russians brothers, but this war started because the Ukrainians were genociding Russian speakers in the Donbass?
Oh, the Russian speaking thing. That's my uh, most hated Russian BS. And that one I can attest, like this, that's something that I can personally tell you, like, so with the Peace Corps, when we arrived, half of us were put into one language group and half the other, depending on where we were going to live. I just happened to be assigned to the Ukrainian language group to learn Ukrainian, even though I ended up living in the center of the country where there really is a mixture of both languages spoken and kind of what's called Surgic, which is like the kind of a combination of the two with some older, my village is like 900 years old. So there's just some words that have been used in certain areas for a long time. So having being someone who studied Ukrainian and for 3 months and then just learned it, I had been on the opposite side of that a couple of times when I traveled down to Odessa, for example, and I would ask people, like, I'd say, I'm sorry, I don't understand Russian. Can you speak Ukrainian? And some of them would refuse. I don't know if that's because they could have been Russian. They don't know how to speak Ukrainian. They can understand it better than they can speak it. It could have been because they were a jerk. I don't know. But Ukrainian has been known, when Russia was pushing everyone in Ukraine to speak Russian, like they made them learn that Russian in school and banned Ukrainian. Ukrainian was also thought of, not because this idea was pushed by Russia, as like a village, like a poor person, or like a village language, which is really insulting. So anyway, I guess just Russia has been very obviously in history books trying to force Ukrainians and other countries that they've occupied into speaking Russia because, they want everybody to understand them and speak their language so they can control them better and disseminate their BS more easily. So if any language has been discouraged, looked down upon, blah, 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 if anyone's been killed for speaking it, it is absolutely 100% Ukrainian and not Russian. There are plenty of people in Ukraine, millions of people who still speak Russian, and they grew up in areas where they speak that, and they have their entire lives. Now we understand historically why that happened. I know also at the front, it's really common for the guys to all, not all, but many of them do speak Russian, especially if they're, on a mission. Because if you think about it, one thing that I've encountered, and I know that, so I've had some Ukrainians get quite embarrassed because they're trying to speak like they're Ukrainian, but they haven't, there's like verbs that they haven't used or heard since they were in school, you know? So the last thing you want is to be on a mission and have, you know, enemy fire coming at you and try to communicate with somebody and not remember, like have to hesitate to try to remember a word or something, just for the sake of speaking it. Um, so yeah, it's a lot more Ukrainians that I know personally have been speaking Ukrainian more or only, but it's certainly a lot of them still do speak Russian. That's what they've grown up. That's what they've been speaking for their entire lives. And at 50 years old, again, you're not used to speaking. You know, it's like speaking a different way or what. Like, and in my opinion, even Ukraine, a lot of people will say that know Slavic languages will think that they're really similar. I think they're quite different, Ukrainian and Russian. So um, I think they're quite a bit different, honestly. It's taken me a lot longer to be able to understand Russian. I can't speak it very well, but I can understand a lot more now just from hearing it more. But yeah, sorry. I know that was kind of a ramble.
No,
but
that's the kind of
that's what I do.
Aryeh, I see you're
Oh, you hear the bubbles. Oh.
That the first 99% of that page was not a ramble. The bubbles bit, maybe. That being said, a couple of points just to add to what Paige said, and just one thought. You know, normally when people go to countries and they speak about them, 9 times out of 10, they haven't lived there. And if they did live there, it was in a program on a guided tour, you know, in a way where they got a very sunny tourist view of the country. Paige was in the Peace Corps there, right? She did not get a rose-colored, you know, government Potemkin tour of the country. So what she is saying is from a ground view. Further, she's been back multiple times since and gone around herself on the ground with people that have divergent, you know, completely different ideas on government and the future of Ukraine. Um, she's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. This isn't somebody being like, yeah, I was with government officials for 2 weeks. They took me around, was in a lovely hotel, you know, went to all the sites, saw some buildings, was taking a buka, and that's, you know, what they're telling you. This is somebody who's really been there and really seen. And as far as the language, right? One of the things, and I've said this multiple times, is during the first invasion, for the first couple of years, I legitimately believed that this was just a conflict over land and was irrelevant and was a fight that the Russians had legitimate grievances and the Ukrainians had legitimate grievances. I was taken into a certain extent by the propaganda. When that started changing was when I started seeing actual footage and documentation of crimes and craziness from the Russian side. And then one day magically it changing to the, you know, from we want freedom and the Russian speakers want to be part of Russia to they're genociding the Russian speakers with zero evidence of it. And that I think kind of broke it for me. Around that point because I saw, you know, it's complete BS. The narrative has completely changed. There's been no evidence presented for it. And as far as, you know, Russian speakers in Ukraine, right? Historically, there have been many, right? The Ukrainian Jewish population primarily spoke Russian. This is due to assimilation. You have to understand through history, non-Russian speakers in Russia and then the USSR were persecuted. They did not have the same advancement opportunities. They did not have the ability to survive within the system in the same way. And people changed languages. Further, there were languages that were banned. There were languages that became banned, right? I had family in jail in the USSR for copying Hebrew prayer books, not Zionist ideas on moving to Israel, not Western ideas, not Jewish literature, not theology, literally prayer books, because the language and the religion was being persecuted. So this is absolutely insane. And then further, right, within the occupied areas of Ukraine, the Russians have banned Ukrainian. They've thrown people in jail in re-education camps for singing and speaking in Ukrainian. They're literally doing what they're claiming the Ukrainians are doing to them with zero evidence. And it's absolutely insane. It blows my mind. And this is one of the things you do if you are a bad faith actor, is when there is some accusation being leveled against you, you make a counter narrative where the other side is doing it. Back to you.
You're absolutely right. And that projection is it is a huge, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an example that really shows who Russia is, shows the narcissistic tendencies of their leader and their culture, where they need to project onto others those things that they are doing themselves. It's one of the reasons I think that the biolabs nonsense had as much actual traction as it did. The Russians, the Ukrainians, as far as we know, did not ever do any biological weapons development at all. But the Soviet Union certainly did, and they did a lot of it. I've studied that pretty in depth, and the Biopreparat program was absolutely enormous. And you've got defectors like Alexander Kuzminov and Ken Alabek who have left and have talked about what it was like and how big it was. At its peak, it had over 150,000 employees working full time in producing biological warfare. And I think they used that as a way to test and see whether they'd be able to get away with biological warfare on the front or not. And I do believe they decided not to. But I don't for a second believe that Russia actually destroyed their stockpiles at all. Or if they did destroy their stockpiles, they built smaller facilities quietly to keep producing. Aryeh?
Or sold them.
Well said,
Or
both of
sold
you.
them. Yep, that was one of the things. In the Iraqi invasion, they didn't find weapons of mass destruction, but in one of the bunkers, they actually found a fermenter that had traces of now sanitized smallpox in these fermenters in Iraq. And that means that that Saddam at some point absolutely had probably the nastiest strategic weapon left on Earth. And that is a huge, huge problem. Aryeh?
Yeah. So in regards to just the Saddam stuff beforehand, it's also important to remember that he was driving trucks that were specifically designed for dealing with biological weapons around and pretending to have them in stock, with the idea that that would keep away countries from invading. He did, though, as you said, there is evidence to support that he had certain biological weapons. But the reason I raised my hand is in regards to the biolab, right? And that, those conspiracy theories with Ukraine. I think there's also another big factor on why that has gained some significant traction within certain conspiracy theory communities and other communities. And I think part of the reason was because of the hitback to people pertaining to COVID, when people said that they suspected that it was from a biolab in China, right? And then people were being called crazy and conspiracy theorists for that. And then the evidence now points towards that, right? So people, put one and one together, right? Well, they lied to me about that. They have to, have been, or they were wrong about that. They have to be, wrong about this also. It's very easy once you've seen one specific type of conspiracy like that turn out to be true, to believe that every single time there's going to be, it's going to be correct and there's going to be a confirmation bias there. Back to you.
There absolutely is, and the shame of all of that is that the COVID was actually, I'm not going to say they did a great job of it, but it was competently managed on an international scale in the earlier days, and it was definitely responded to in some places overly strong, in some places not nearly enough. But that said, the world did respond reasonably competently. And this is coming from an infectious disease nerd who's been watching this stuff since the first SARS rolled out. But the way the science works is the information changes. And huge chunks of our population can't seem to understand that as information changes and ideas change, that their beliefs should change with it. It's bizarre because they just like to assume that whatever was.
I've actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been thinking a lot about that with just what you were, along with what you were just saying, is like, whether you're, well, we've evolved, people evolve, whether it's over thousands and thousands of years, or, I mean, just look at the way that we have behaviorally changed or evolved over the last couple hundred. And for some reason, it's like some people are just okay with the idea of like, no, this is how we are, and we're going to stay this way forever and not get better. And that's been good. That's concerning to me, for my kids and my grandkids and so on, and just the future of everyone. But yeah, we should be learning and changing and understanding things. Just look at medicine is a huge, like the way that we treated certain illnesses or in the past. A lot of them we didn't even know about or couldn't even diagnose, but our treatments of them were so far off, and we've learned from that. And so the kind of this resistance to that learning and science and everything is pretty scary. But at the same time, how do you control people? Got to keep them dumb, I guess.
Keep them dumb.
I want to get new, fresh ideas and
keep them dumb, keep them scared.
Right.
Aryeh, I see you got your hand up.
I think there is, and this is within every country, that there is a large segment of our species, right, which doesn't want to critically think about issues and doesn't want to deal with trauma or drama. They would rather go along to get along. We've seen this in every regime, every society, every culture through human history, right? And there are a lot of people that refuse to critically analyze their beliefs once they are formulated. This is across the board, from religion to medicine to scientific to political, and this is a creature flaw or species flaw that affects almost all of us to some extent. And I think it's important to remember that when trying to deal with this and understand that some of us have higher levels of empathy and other factors that I think cause this, or there are certain people that seek information or seek truth, right? And they want to know what the actual information is, opposed to getting an easy answer and not having to think about it. And I think when you're one of those people, it's very hard to understand and empathize and interact with people that don't. Right? Paige, you saw what was going on with Ukraine. You've put in tens of thousands of hours of work. Most people have saw what was going on with Ukraine. They said that's horrible. They went back to eating their dinner. Right? This is a normal human reaction. I think we need to be aware of it, as sad as it is, in order to address it. Otherwise, you don't you're not as effective dealing with people or getting the information out. And then also, if you're aware of it being a problem, you can address it better and get some of those people that otherwise would fall into that behavioral pattern to start actually caring, because you can address it in a way then and formulate a strategy to make them care. whereas otherwise it's just that sucks. That's horrible. Please pass the ketchup.
That sucks. That's horrible. Please pass the ketchup. Now there is a
That's what I'm trying to
that is like the
Not
epitome
one of my most articulate statements, Alex. I apologize. I could have said
No, I
that a
think
little bit more
that's a great
articulately.
statement. I think it perfectly captures the hubris of a large portion of Americans, actually. I think it's a very good illustration, and it's kind of a scary one there. Do we have anybody else who'd like to come up and ask some questions with Paige here? If you would like to, please pop up. Just request to speak. We'll bring you up, and you will be able to ask some questions. Uh, Paige, while we wait for that, I'm going to ask you: do you have a favorite moment from your time in Ukraine? I know it's a tricky question sometimes, but
That is a. I think. I'm thinking that it was like one of the moments when we were down at the beach and just like, I don't know, because at that point I had already been there for a year and a half. I was there with Ukrainian friends. I had like assimilated as much as I possibly could have at that point, and was just down like on vacation with friends, and like, and it looked very different from the vacations I had gone on before, but it was so much just fun and beautiful. Like the Black Sea is beautiful, and like just driving through the countryside and seeing all these really, because that was the first time I'd really been in the South, and and also visiting Odessa. Odessa is really beautiful as well. Just like the buildings and stuff like that, like statues and all that. So I guess kind of getting to experience the. Okay, I thought of something even more. Because those are like the sights and sounds and everything. The food is incredible, in my opinion. But during the summer of 2011 and 2012, I worked at a English language summer camp. It was 3 weeks long, and we stayed in the forest in these like cabins, which I had never done any kind of summer camp like that before in my life. And so that was in and of itself quite an experience. But it was one of the only times that like I would get together with other Peace Corps volunteers occasionally. We would meet up, but I was a 45-minute bus ride from the closest one to me and to one of my closest friends that I would hang out with on a somewhat regular basis. I was at least an hour away, and that doesn't account like waiting for buses and stuff if they showed up. So when we were at this camp, we were just like, one, it was cool. It was an English language camp, but we were also getting I got a lot of experience speaking Ukrainian when we weren't doing the activities and stuff. We could communicate with the students in Ukrainian, and that's how I learned the language quite a bit, was through the kids at my school where I taught and in these summer camps. There was also a group of children from Internat, which is it's like the children's, like, I don't know how the PC term for it, children's homes, like orphans. I know, baby. So sorry, once wild again. So those kids were there too. Yeah, there you go. Those kids were there too, and they didn't speak any English. So I kind of got to bond with some of them. I don't know, just kind of like, yeah. So the kids are just, one, easier for me to communicate with in their language, especially at that time. But two, they're just kids, and it was just fun. And then like being with other Americans in the forest, we were both years we were there on the 4th of July, so we did have a little, American Independence Day get together and went to the cafe down. Like I had to walk like 45 minutes, but so it was just like a really cool experience, and nothing that I'd ever done before. So I know I said like 8 things, but I think that was it at the camp.
no, that's wonderful. It's a great experience to hear about. I'm gonna ask you a little bit about your motivations. What keeps you going in the in this world of fundraising and helping Ukraine? What do you think your biggest motivation is here?
That's also a good question. And it's changed, I think, over time. You know, initially, like I said, I did kind of, it was kind of a panic, like, oh my God, like people, they're going to die. I have to do something. And so that was just kind of a reactionary thing, you know, just fear, panic, anxiety, I guess. Then after some time, and I started feeling like really seeing how effective the work was and how much I was able to help, it kind of changed to feeling more like a purpose. And that's a little, I'm not like a spiritual person. I'm not I just don't, I'm not, I don't know, like I'm not like into fate or any kind of stuff like that. But like, but at the same time, it started to feel like it was my purpose. And then, you know, after some time, it still feels like that, but it's also kind of out of necessity now because there are a handful of civilians that we help, especially primarily the civilian aid is just like medicine and stuff. But I mean, some of the medicine is for seniors and it's, you know, like heart medication and stuff. So it's like they have to have it to like live. But, you know, we have at least a dozen, I would say probably out of all the units we help on a regular basis, maybe 5 or 6 of them like truly rely on us now and have, you know, and so it's not an option to not do it, I guess. So that's not like a positive reason, but it is a reason, because I know how much Natasha and I, through this fundraising, I know how much we've been able to provide and how essential that's been. And thanks to, again, a lot of you in here in this space. I know how critical a lot of that aid has been, and I hate to imagine them not having that. So that's kind of where I'm at now, where I still feel like it is a purpose, but it's not like I don't feel like guilt or anything. I don't feel like I need to do more. Like I am proud. I've busted my I have busted my ass. I've made personal sacrifices. I'm financially like I'm exhausted, but you know, but it needs to be done, and I'm proud of it, and I have learned a lot about people, not necessarily all good stuff, but I'm trying to pass on the positive lessons to my children and other youth, or even people my own age in my community, friends, and I have. I have some acquaintances or friends that I can just tell that they are understanding things a little more clearly now, not just with regard to Ukraine, but I think just kind of it kind of helped them reevaluate themselves and their own contributions and things and wanting to get involved and so on. So
Absolutely. It's
yeah,
I will say that in the early days when this all started, people, well, I've paid attention to Ukraine pretty much since the invasion of Crimea, but I never really had much of a connection in any way. I didn't really care much about Ukraine, and I'm sad to say that at this point, but it's what the truth was. I got involved because I really hate Russia, and that was my original motivation to get involved in this. But actually, seeing a lot of what you did is what's gotten me into it and in wanting to do the good work. And you have been an inspiration to me, so I do want to thank you for that. And your work is good, and you've been doing.
Thank you.
Brian, I see your hands up. Please welcome.
Yeah, it's good to see the homie Paige in here. It's been a while. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, I can vouch that you have worked your ass off. And you're. I don't blame you for being exhausted because this is mentally and often physically exhausting work what you've gotten yourself involved in. And I appreciate you. I know the people in this space appreciate you. I sure as hell know the Ukrainians, people, and the soldiers appreciate you. And it's people like you that have allowed Ukraine to kind of hold the line here. literally. And yeah, so I just want to offer you all the encouragement I can to keep up the fight. Know that you're not alone. There are other people here that are doing things, and it's important. So just mostly wanted to say hi.
Hi, Brian. Thank you. And that's I thought of one more as you were saying that, and I really do appreciate that, because anybody that tells you that doing anything that I no one is completely selfless. So it is nice to still have encouragement, because there's not a lot of in bubbles. There's not a whole lot of positivity, when you're dealing with this kind of stuff. So one other thing that keeps me so invested is Natasha too. She has. I can't, like, I would be not just abandoning, or like I would be letting down, like, the people that receive the aid, but like Natasha does what I'm doing, but she's Ukrainian and on the ground, and it's her friends and family, and she's being shot at kind of stuff. So like she I know that sometimes, like, she's hasn't heard from me, or she's had a harder time getting a hold of me or something, because life happens, and so they're just slammed with work or whatever, so I can't get back to her as quickly as I normally do. I know she stresses about it, because she's in the same boat, that like we've been able to help so much, but the thing is in like this other unit who's friends with this guy, like he hears about it, and then he reaches out and he asks for help, and then it's just like it kind of snowballs. And then we have gotten to the point where we've had to prioritize whether prioritize aid. Like, okay, are we going to help? We had to decide, like, we are not going to be able to provide civilian aid like we had been for some time, because the money just wasn't there. So obviously having to choose between helping the front or helping provide orphan war orphans and stuff is with essentials is difficult, but it is what it is at this point. So if the front breaks, and if there's no front, then there might not be any civilians to help anyway. So it's not a good position to be in, or easy position to be in, but it is what it is.
Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, that last sentence really crystallizes it. Princess Cannoli actually expressed that exact sentiment on a documentary video that I saw. Exactly that. If we do not help the front, then the aid in to the rear won't matter, because those people won't be there. So yeah, I think you hit it on the head. How are the supply chains flowing? You still able to source? Obviously funding is the driver, but once you have the funding, are you still able to source the stuff you need, or is that becoming a challenge, or is it fairly available, the stuff that you're wanting?
I can get it all, Brian. Most of it we can get within the country. There are some things that we bless you. There are some things that we get from outside the country, and have different organizations or groups deliver it, bring it across from wherever. But it fortunately is nothing like it was before. In the beginning, that's one of the things I was helping with, was like trying to find medicines, because initially all the stores were sold out. I think some of it might have been panic buying, but then it was also just you think of common medications and things, and after a few weeks of no shipments coming in, the stores were bare, and so people didn't have these really important medications. So I was working with some other Peace Corps volunteers and other Ukrainians I knew throughout the country, like just trying to find this medication and stuff. So that is, I have a background in logistics, so that has been really fortunate for all of this, because it's one of the biggest challenges with war in general, or any work that's on the other side of the world, when I can't be there to do it myself sometimes, or have trusted people. But overall, it's we've been for what we what we do, we have not been running or had any difficulties recently, knock on wood. You had said something, Brian. Yeah, I know. There's not a whole lot of great news there. You had just said something just before that I was going to follow up on too. I'm trying to remember what it. The frontline aid versus civilians. So that's also not. I just wanted to point out too that like that's not just like Westerners speaking on behalf of Ukrainians. That's a really common phase for like a lot of volunteers and stuff in Ukraine and fundraisers is everything to the front. And that's because it's the same thing. They recognize that like if we don't give everything they need, they can't survive. And that's we're doing. I know you agree, huh? So that goes for huge weapons from the U.S. and the rest of the West and NATO and all that, and down to the obligation of Ukrainians within the country to help their own people. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That wasn't something that like we're deciding that for them or something.
Perfect. Thank you, Paige. We are just about at the hour here. We got less than a minute to go, and we'll be switching over to Understanding Genocide with Heather and Gina. I just have one last question for you, Paige, and it's a quick one. How would 20-year-old
And Nancy.
How would 20-year-old Paige feel if you told her that, she's going to be fighting at the front lines of the first 21st century war in a cyberpunk dystopia with drones flying around and doing most of the fighting, and just an information war on the internet and all the aspects of the insanity that is this conflict? What would she say?
Probably, that's a bad bitch. And did she get all the tattoos she wanted?
And did you?
Almost.
Well, we look forward to seeing when the last one arrives.
No, it really is. I have those moments quite often, like just because I have had some really amazing opportunities to meet just really interesting people, whether they're volunteers, just they have different services or expertise or whatever, and as well as like advocates and things like that, politicians. I cringed when
That's fair.
the good kind, I guess. Yeah, I know, right?
Well, thank you for coming on. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I think I lost you there.
Oh, can you hear me now?
No,
Sorry, I muted myself. Yeah, I was just gonna finish by saying like that I have fairly often moments where I kind of like think or say aloud like something I just did or experience that I have or something, and I just kind of like laugh at myself because I'm like, what is this? Like I of course never imagined, but I plan on framing every if you guys didn't see it, I've been awarded a medal from the 35th Marine Brigade, which is really freaking cool. I don't physically have it yet. I'm going to be getting it here in a couple months when I go back again. But all my certificates and patches and that and everything, I'm going to make sure that are framed and right in front of my the faces of my sons, so that for the rest of their lives, they can never forget for even a moment how cool their mom is.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. Thank you for your time. This is the end of our Signal and Noise segment for this evening. We do need to get off the air to make room for Understanding Genocide. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who came up. Thank you, Aryeh, for helping me co-host. And Heroam Slava.
Heroam Slava. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. And as soon as you're ready, Prince, we can swap out for co-hosts.